Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to once again be joined by the great Rachel Portman. In 1997, Rachel became the very first female composer to ever win the Oscar for Best Original Score. She has written the music for films such as Chocolat, The Joy Luck Club, Emma, The Cider House Rules, The Manchurian Candidate, Benny and June, The Legend of Bagger Vance, Oliver Twist, Infamous, Mona Lisa Smile, Godmothered, and many more. On this year's Soundtrack Cologne, the 18th annual film music event, Rachel will receive the Lifetime Achievement Award. It is my pleasure to welcome Rachel Portman.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you back on my show. Thank you very much for taking a time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that. And Rachel, one German radio station once called you a true heroine of the profession. And looking back on your long and successful career, what are some of your proudest moments, either in terms of films that are closest to your heart or a great work relationship? What comes to mind?
Well, many things come to mind. I think most of all, I feel incredibly fortunate to have had the chance to work with and carrying on working with, very wonderful directors on films that are really inspirational. And, a few projects stand out for me. And so in particular, working with Jonathan Demme, who unfortunately is no longer here, but I collaborated with him on three films, Beloved, Manchurian Candidate, and then The Truth About Charlie. And he was an extraordinary visionary director who was so excited by music that he encouraged me and to use music and to write music in a really bold way. And I found that creatively really interesting. So I was really lucky to work with him, and also proud that I did as well, because he is such a sort of an enormously important film director. I've worked with Roman Polanski. It was fascinating working with him on Oliver Twist. A great master of the cinema. I learned a lot from working with a director who understood the use of music so well, and was so confident about working with a composer. And then on smaller projects, like for example, I've done a couple of films with the director Lena Scherfig, Their Finest and One Day, and I really like working with her. I think she's a really good director, and she's fun, and she pushes me to do the very, very best I can do, and I enjoy her films. It's always wonderful working with a director, who's made a wonderful film. And I would add to that, probably one of my all-time favorites is Never Let Me Go, which Mark Romanek directed, which I think is one of the most perfect films ever made that I know of. And then of course, beyond that, there's Lasse Hallström, who I worked with 3 times. I've worked with 3 times, more recently on A Dog's Purpose, but yes, also on Chocolat and The Cider House Rules. So I mean, I could go on, but those spring to mind first of all.
Great. And thank you, Rachel. And before we talk more about these prestigious and great directors, of course, it goes without saying to me that it's a long road. I think it was a long journey to get to the point where you are now. I mean, you transitioned from working on great BBC projects to major Hollywood productions. So I think it's a long-winded process. And what are your recollections in that department? Let's say the patience you had to muster to get through it.
I think if there's one word that would sum up what my 20s, when I was in my 20s, were like, was determination. I was just determined to break through. Nothing else mattered to me. I was so driven by wanting to write music for the screen that I I wrote music for, as many television productions, and they were often, a lot of. I was very lucky. I worked, early on in my 20s with, some very good directors, and so the projects I was working on, although they were television, and I say although because now television is very different than it was back then, which was that I was very keen to get into movies. And although I loved television, that wasn't where I wanted to stay. And nowadays, television and cinema are much more on an equal footing, I think. But yeah, so I think what helped me was just holding out for breaking into the industry and doing all I could. And I got lucky with some really beautiful projects in the latter part of my 20s when I was 28, sort of, and films that were winning BAFTAs. And so then it was easy for me to make a transition to work on bigger films and come to LA and start working on studio films.
Great, thank you very much, Rachel. And as I understand, you are also scheduled to be a part of a panel at this year's Soundtrack Cologne, but I'm sure you will have lots of stories to share and many things to reminisce about. And I'm also fairly certain that over the course of your career, you have been asked many questions by your peers and young up-and-coming composers. Which advice would you give them, or what is your, let's say, take on what is essential to really make it in this industry, and when it comes to communication with filmmakers, finding a common ground, the business side of things?
Well, that's a huge question. It's a lot to answer. I mean, I think you have to be prepared as a film composer to work to very tight deadlines, and that can be very alarming and stressful. And so you've got to be quite strong, I think, and resilient. And also, it's every new project, working with every new director, the relationship that you have with them is an unknown quantity. And I've worked with so many different people, and sometimes oftentimes it's great and easy. And then there are other times when it's much more challenging. And as a composer, you've got to be ready and prepared to know that you're going to be working sometimes, with people who don't have a language in which to communicate to you musically, or they don't know what they want, or they ask you to do something and you do it, and then they say, no, that's not what I meant. But actually, what the direction they gave you was very specific, but then it turns out that they didn't know what necessarily they were asking for. So it's a very, very complex job, because you're also creating, you're creating music from, you're pouring your heart and soul into writing and producing and offering up your creative ideas, to directors and producers who can then easily say, no, we don't like that. And then you've got to be prepared to go back to the drawing board and start again and take on board what they said and, start again. And you have to have broad shoulders. You have to be, and it's tough. It's tough and, but very exciting and so gratifying. And, the most exciting reward in the world is to see the alchemy that happens once you put music to film. And, and of course, recording with an orchestra is the reward, and having a recording is the gold at the end. And it's fascinating. And every project is different. Every film it has a different story and a totally different outcome for you as a composer.
Yes, absolutely. Very well put, and thank you. And yes, that's a very interesting statement, because you have to adapt every time. It's a new story, it's a new film, it's potentially a new collaborator. And even if it's somebody you've worked with a couple of times, it's still a new scenario, because we are talking about a new film, and of course, other producers or different producers might be involved.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the really tricky things when you're working on a film with a director and you've been collaborating quite closely what they want to exactly what they want, and then there are notes from a sort of group of producers that come in, and that can be very difficult to navigate because you're suddenly pleasing more than one voice. And obviously, I mean, not obviously, but I always feel it's my real duty is to do what the director wants. But obviously, the producers are important too. But
yeah,
you don't want to dilute what you're doing, and things can become quite sort of difficult, especially if time is running out. When you suddenly get a lot of notes that conflict with one another.
Yes, yes.
But again, there are ways through that. There are definitely ways through that, and just asking everybody, asking them all to come together as one voice, or offering two alternatives. So two different versions of a particular piece of music in a film. That's another way of getting around it.
Yes, yes. And of course, ultimately, you have to serve the filmmaker's vision, and you have to serve the film. And you also previously mentioned something which is also very interesting, the phrase going back to the drawing board, which is for many people the biggest nightmare or nightmarish scenario possible, because you have worked on a film, let's say 4 or 5 weeks, and you think it's working, and then somebody comes along. No, I think we have to go into an entirely different direction. And then you look at your schedule and you realize, I may have 4 weeks left. So I think it can be very hard not to panic.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I've been there. I've been in that panicking place. I was in that place working with Jonathan Demme on Manchurian Candidate. I went down the wrong avenue. We recorded a whole score, and then he decided he didn't like it. And it's a terrible position to be in. And, a lot of money had been spent, and there were many reasons why it happened. He was a bit remote and he didn't come to the sessions and stuff. And I was very, very, and it was a big studio movie, and I was worried I was going to be fired, but he didn't fire me. He said, come on, let's have another go. And so I went back in, but at the time I felt like I was just hanging on, by my fingertips to a skyscraper on the outside of the building. I mean, that's what it felt like. I was so worried, but it all turned out great in the end. And I went back in and I figured out what to do. And I mean, that's what I mean about being, you need a kind of resilience, I think.
Yes.
Because it's when there are big budgets involved. Well, I mean, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, even if it was a tiny budget and it was a small film, I would still care hugely and not want to, to something not to work out. But it's very, very hard to come back from a place of feeling that you've done something wrong when you've gone down a long way and you've done a lot of work and you have to sort of kind of redo it. Yeah. Same thing on Cider House Rules. But it wasn't bad on Cider House Rules, but I finished the score for that. And then like a week or 2 weeks later, Lasse Hallström came back to me and he said, you know what? I think you don't have enough themes in there. He said, I think you need, so I'd done the whole score. It was all done. He said, I think we need, 1 or 2 more themes in there. And I thought, oh gosh, I've got to go back and sort of start writing. And I was just, I had been, on one of the pieces of music, he said, there's a little phrase in here that I really like. And it was just it was like 2 bars. So like 5 seconds of music in this. And he said, I really like that bit. I took that bit away and I wrote a whole new theme based on that, which is the main theme for Cider House Rules, which I'm so grateful. He said, come on, go back in and dig further. And I wrote loads more music and it was, the score became much richer and much better because of that.
And I think Cider House Rules is one of your best scores. And I think it's also a fan favorites. And of course, the work you've done for Lasse Hallström speaks for itself. Cider House, Chocolat, which I just recently listened to again today, and A Dog's Purpose. But I think that's also the essence of collaboration, trying to make the other person to shine, and let's get somebody to do better, finding a common ground. Even if you say, well, I think it's good, but we are not quite here, let's fiddle with it, and ultimately it may sound even better. I think that's the way to go, versus as opposed to saying you're fired, you're off the project, and let's get somebody else who may have a week or 2 or 3 weeks left. And I think that happens, or has happened, a lot.
Oh, it does happen a lot. Yeah, or it's not unheard of for a composer to say, "I'm sorry, I'm done. What I've done is great. I can't do better," which is their prerogative to do that. But that's not how I work. But there are people who do that, who say, "No, I think it's fine what I've done already," and so that's really difficult, So it can be all sorts of different things.
Yeah. I mean, there are also, of course, crazy stories. And one story which I've heard, and I don't think it may be true, it may not be true, that Marco Beltrami, of course, a big composer and a giant in this industry, he was once taken off a project. And then the composer who was hired afterwards was given Marco's music as temp and as guideline. Do you believe that? I mean, it sounds so ridiculous. It could be true.
No, I know. No. I know. Oh, well, things like that happen all the time. Yes, no. And I also, I remember Jonathan Demme. He sort of a couple of years later, after working on, this was The Truth About Charlie, because I also recorded a whole lot of music for The Truth About Charlie, which he then said he didn't like. And a while later, he was in my friend, the music editor's, in her studio, in her editing place, and he happened to hear this music of the score that he'd rejected. And he said, "That's really nice. That's really nice, that music. What is it?" and it was the score he'd thrown out. So it's really funny. He would laugh about that now.
Oh my God! Yeah, I can see that happening. I mean, of course, not necessarily him laughing now, but the story you told me about, rejecting or disliking a piece, and then a couple of weeks later, oh, what's that? It's really gorgeous. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you brought up the Manchurian Candidate. Do you think, or maybe it's not, let's say, it's not necessarily a film or score which you are known for?
No.
Do you, let's say, or would you like to score more thrillers, or let's say maybe even action thrillers down the road, or is that absolutely not up your alley? If I may ask.
No. I'm not longing to score more action films or dark films. I mean, I liked working on that film because I was out of my comfort zone, and I like being pushed. I like being challenged. I want to work on projects that really interest me, and whatever genre they are, it makes really no difference. And I'm drawn to human stories and sort of drama. I'm not really drawn to action or horror anyway, because those aren't the kind of films I watch. And so, that's sort of my blueprint for wanting to work on this or that project.
Great. And you just mentioned, or a few minutes ago, you mentioned directors such as, Roman Polanski, one of my personal favorite directors of all time. And you had written the music for Hollywood Twist, Roman Polanski's version of the Charles Dickens novel and of his classic novel. How would you describe Roman Polanski as a director? What is he looking for? What does he look for in musical terms? And how does he collaborate, or how did he collaborate with you?
Well, he's directed opera. He's very comfortable, talking about music and the kind of thing that he wants. And it was interesting. In many ways, he was quite hands-off. he 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 would talk about a scene, and then he would be completely comfortable with me suggesting music for it. And he would say, "Yep, I understand that." And I'd say, "Well, it's going to be orchestrated like this." And he'd say, "Yeah, that's fine. You don't need to mock it up or anything, or give me a demo. I understand." And that's what I mean. He had the musical ability to kind of know how I was going to orchestrate things. And so our conversations were always about subtle changes in tone. And that was really, great, because, so the kind of conversation we were having were, it would be in words, describing in words what he wanted. He didn't need to give me musical terms because he trusted me to understand that. And so it was really nice to work with someone like that. And that's what I mean by him having the confidence to direct me musically without, because there's often, I often find if directors feel they feel they have to know about everything, and and so a sort of a relatively new director who hasn't worked with music before can feel quite uncomfortable when introduced to a composer, because they know that the music is going to have a huge effect, and they feel that like they want to ask for what they want, but they actually really don't know. And in the case of someone like Polanski, he's like, well, of course he feels like he's talking to me as head of a department, and that I will come up with what the film needs, if you know what I mean. Yes, and sometimes directors instead are so, they feel that they have to be able to say, oh no, this is how you do it. And actually, it works so beautifully when they don't do that.
I think there's also a few directors that are kind of knowledgeable about music, and as a result, they try to communicate in musical terms. Oh, I think this should be that, and this should be E flats or whatever, and then it may come across as, how do I put this? Maybe quote unquote pretentious to a composer who really knows about these terms, if that makes sense.
Yes, it can be really off-putting, because a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. It's like, it's like, yeah, you know what? I think it would be really good if we had an oboe here, and if as a composer you're thinking, no, I really don't think so. Then that means as a composer your vision is clouded by you aren't free to respond as naturally as you might be. So you're right. It's one of the trickiest things is and the other thing which is which leads on from that is temp scores. They're necessary. I understand they're necessary, but they can be really confusing for a composer if they have to reference the temp score, which has gone before, which is written for a totally different project, and may or may not resonate with them. And it sort of clouds their vision. If there was a way of expressing that for clouding their compositional, but it's a sort of I find it clouds creative vision. Having a temp score there, because the last thing I want to do is write something that's similar to something else.
Yes. But I think there are directors who are averse to temp music, and they actually have the clout to say, well, I'm not going to use temp. I was told that, for instance, Tommy Lee Jones doesn't use temp on his films, such as the Homesman, for instance.
That's great. I think that's so great. It's so, yeah. Also, it means that I imagine, because I'm not an editor, but I know that this is how films, used to be edited. It shows up the film and the film that you're making very clearly with no music on there, no temp music. You can really look at the edit in a very different way.
Yes, and yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. But I think many editors, and also in order to work, let's say, efficiently, or in order to present the director what they think is right, they want music because they think it's easier to edit and so on. So I think it depends on many factors, also on the person, on the individual working on the film. So, but there are so many people involved, so it's really hard to tell who's content with one thing and who overrules
know.
who. So,
But that goes back to what I said earlier, in that every single project that I come on board with, there's a totally different story is going to come out of it, in terms of the working relationships, how the other people like to work. And so you have to approach each new project like that.
Rachel, I would like to briefly discuss your approach for movies in general, because you said you gravitate towards films which, let's say, are non-action oriented. I mean, love stories about people and everyday life, or a love story, romance, Only You, for instance, directed by the great Norman Jewison. Of course, there's Emma, Douglas McGrath, your Oscar-winning score. You scored The Legend of Bagger Vance, directed by Robert Redford. So I think all three directors, which I just mentioned, all offer something with their movies that is very moving, interesting, at times funny, Emma, and also captivating. So I think it's the perfect, or maybe the perfect canvas for you.
Yes. I think so. There's sort of, I love working on projects that are, not out and out comedy, but that can be funny, that can be ironic, that can be that have humor, that have a beating human heart, that have drama, which all those three have, and have magic and innocence. And I love writing music which is which can be more than one thing. So it can be bittersweet rather than just sweet, but can be funny, sad. That's another thing I like doing. I like sort of mixing types of music together.
I just also mentioned Douglas McGrath, and you scored most of his films that were released after Emma. I think there was Nicholas Nickleby, there was Infamous, and of course he won the Oscar for Emma. So, and that was a huge honor. And there was also stiff competition that year. That was when they still had two categories: best drama score and best musical and comedy.
Yes. No, it was. It was such a surprise to me winning. I never expected to, and I was young, and I went along, and it was all, I don't think I didn't know what to expect, and it was just so exciting to go. And I couldn't believe it when my name was read out, and I went up. So yeah, you never know how these things happen, and why you got through, why you got voted, and and why another time there was another nomination you didn't. And there seems little rhyme or reason to me, I have to say, that why I won that year for Emma. But I'm hugely fortunate and proud that I did, and it certainly opened doors for me. It's a great film, Emma, and it was so much fun to write the music for it. To be lucky enough to go to the Oscars and actually come home with one as well. I mean, the funniest thing was coming home and when you get on a flight, before you get on the flight, you have to put your bags through security. And my little hand luggage I had to put through security. And at LA airport, they were like, "What?" As they took out this gold thing that was so heavy, and it was just, it was unreal at the time. It was so exciting.
Rachel, would you say that in today's environment, the general attitude towards music and technology has affected you in some way, even when it comes to a long-time relationship?
How do you mean in terms of technology? How do you mean?
Yeah, technology in terms of, I mean, many people or most people are required to present a digital mock-up, and John
Oh
Williams.
yeah, no,
Yep.
definitely. I mean, definitely. I mean, yes, and that's something that I do. Digital mock-ups are ubiquitous now. They really are, and that's fine. I mean, as a classically trained composer, having not gone to film school, unlike most composers now who go to film school, and it's a complete requirement. I kind of got away with got away with being able to write, in a very, very simple, very pure form at my piano. Um, and I still get away with it. And then I work with someone who does digital, sort of mock-ups for me, which is fine. And I orchestrate them and work with them very closely. But it's part of the process that I never actually generate myself, as it were. But that's just, I mean, everybody composes and creates in their own way, and collaborates in various ways. And I mean, that's how I do it. But when I was starting out, there was no need for that. In fact, nobody knew really what the composer was writing. Largely, I mean, I always presented every single piece of music in a recording, even though it was on piano, to every director. And this was when I was sort of beginning out, so that they would know. It's like I've always likened it to a drawing, a very fine drawing of what will then be an oil painting, so that you get the movement in it, you get the atmosphere, you get the feeling, but it's not in color yet. That's the difference. So things have changed so much. I mean, years ago, if I was writing from the UK and, say, for example, working on Bagavants with Robert Redford, I would write a bunch of stuff, and then I would make a DAT recording of my themes on piano, and then there would be an overnight FedEx or Midnight Express, which he would get in San Francisco, and he'd hear it a day or two later, and then I'd get feedback. And now, I'm writing in the morning, I'm sending it off. He would be hearing it his morning as soon as he wakes up. It's all there. The music editors put it to picture or whatever. And also that, obviously, with demos as well, mock-up demos. And everything is just so quick. And in lockdown last year, working on Godmothered, I was just thinking, if this had happened, if this pandemic had happened a few years earlier, we just wouldn't have been able to do what we did. But we did all the creative meetings, all the sharing, all the playing of everything was all done through Evercast meetings, like sort of Zooms between the edit suite and everything, and running the picture back and forth. It was quite extraordinary. So things have changed hugely, and it's much easier now.
Yes. In terms of technology, there has been a huge improvement. Of course, not only when it comes to, let's say, sending a cue to a director, but also the filmmaking process has become so much faster and more efficient. You don't have to process the dailies like you used to back in the day. So you don't lose 1 or 2 days in order to get the film developed. So that has changed. Of course, that puts more pressure on composers also, because the swifter post-production process. So it's a double-edged sword.
You have to be quick. You have to be really, really quick. And it's amazing how, as things have got faster, there's always been pressure, but I'm much faster at turning things around, I think. I write fast. You have to be quick, and because you don't have much time, and amazingly, ideas come very fast. So I'm very lucky, and I think that's true. I just think that's true of all composers, is that they know they have to, and so they do. It's the way the creativity often works, is with little time, you still manage somehow.
And of course, there's also the tricky part of being self-critical, and you try to figure out how much music you need. Is it gonna be wall-to-wall score, or had the filmmakers decided on a, let's say, less is more approach, and then you have to wrestle with several ideas. So that's pretty big responsibility also.
Although I have to say that it's rare that that the director and producers want less music. They usually want lots.
Yeah.
And I'm always advocating for less, because I think less is better. But maybe it's an insurance policy. They want to have lots of music there. But I think I think it's great not to have quite so much music in films. Yeah. It has a more powerful effect if it's not constant, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, it also, I think, depends on the movie. I mean, I've seen movies where I felt there's not enough music in there. It could have been more. It could have been more emotional. It could have been better. And there is the flip side to the coin. I think there was just a bit too much, or it's not just the amount of music, it's the scope of the music. Sometimes it's just, I think the music is fine, but there's too much drums, or the drums are mixed in too loud, or there is a little bit.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, completely.
So, I mean, we have covered quite a lot of ground, and I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about some of your most recent projects. I mean, you mentioned Disney's Godmothered, a very lovely score, and I think it's one of those examples where you get to keep the Disney spirit alive with a great orchestral score.
I think I was I wanted to have I wanted to embrace the world of lush Disney films and fairy tales and magic and all of those things. And I used a choir, which was interesting recording in COVID times. But I used a female choir, which was sort of like a wordless female choir, which was really fun. And the director Sharon Maguire, who was really good fun. She wanted a big sweeping melody that would, sort of envelop you like the old movies would almost, but without feeling old-fashioned, as it were. And so it was great fun to find that sound and, and to fill the screen with musical color and singing and sort of twirls and magic, and it was a feast. It was really fun to do it.
Great. And it's a lovely score, and the film's also available on Disney Plus, of course. And you very recently also scored a documentary which you're also nominated for, Julia.
Yes. This is actually, it opens in cinemas in the States tomorrow, and it's about Julia Child, a very iconic cookery personality in the States, who and it's the most wonderful documentary, and it's a sort of portrait of her, and music plays a big part in it. It's like, really, it was like writing music for a drama, and I had a huge amount of fun writing the music for that. It's quite edgy and sort of like badass kind of music sometimes, and then other times it's Parisian and very and then there's a big love theme in there, but Julia Child is a larger than life character, and so there's a lot of humor and a lot of love of food and making food for others, which really appealed to me, because I like writing music about food. I mean, I enjoyed chocolate a lot, and this was kind of similar. So it's good. It was really good.
Right. Did this entail let's say, extensive research about the person, about Julia, or did you just, approach it from, let's say, the normal filmmaking perspective?
You know what? I didn't do any research at all. I suppose. I mean, I might have done if it was a very specific. But this is a biopic that is so beautifully rich and characterful that it was all there on the screen, together with my conversations with the two directors, Betsy West and Julie Cohen. They're extremely intelligent about music, and that was all I needed, was to just, and they sort of kind of really knew what they wanted. And I'll tell you something, they had temped the score. They put a temp score in of the film when I received it, which I didn't watch very much, but a lot of it was my music, and that makes things much easier for me. Even though the music wasn't right, I mean, I wasn't thrown. I was sort of already in their world, if you know what I mean, musically.
Yes,
and that always makes things much easier.
Great.
But it's a great film. Look out for it. It's really good.
I will be sure to watch it. Looking forward to it. And Rachel, what's actually next for you? Can you disclose any information about upcoming projects?
Yeah, well, actually, it's I can about I'm doing at the moment. I'm just about to record in Berlin an album of my film works on piano with cello, which is for Sony, which is coming out next year. So I'm literally about to deliver that. So I've been head down doing that for the past few months, because it's quite a lot. It's a huge amount of music and good fun. But as I think you know, with my my album that I brought out last year as well, Ask the River, I'm interested in doing that, and I've got another album in the pipeline as well afterwards, which is going to be like an Ask the River 2, although it won't be called Ask the River 2, I don't think, but which is going to be non-film related. But this thing that I'm doing in Berlin is there. I'm recording pieces from Chocolat Cider House Rules and Emma, and plus lots of others. So yeah, that's taking my time up. And I also have I do quite a lot of classical work too, and I'm jumping into classical commissions straight after that, and film projects around the side, which I can't really specify at the moment.
Okay, great. Rachel, is there anything else you would like to add?
No. I'm very, very honoured to be getting this award from Cologne, Soundtrack Cologne. It's very exciting indeed for me, and I'm honoured. It's a wonderful festival, so I'm very excited about it.
Rachel, I would like to thank you for taking so much time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate that, and it was a great conversation. I really loved talking to you again, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I did very much. It was lovely to talk to you.